In case I can maybe start already welcoming everybody to this workshop today. It's a second Innovation Tuesday seminar. And today we have the pleasure of welcoming a team of co-founders from, well, it used to be BlackTop Labs and now it's Oro Muscle company, Tanya, Colonna, and Hobey Tam. And for a change, I could read his name properly because he knows why. He made a Facebook joke and now nobody can pronounce his name correctly. So welcome, and it's a really nice opportunity, I think, to connect both locations, Uppsala and Groningen, and to discuss the question that we touched with some of the participants already last week, in terms of what do you do? What does it take to start a company? Also, Tanya and Hobey are coming from different backgrounds in terms of the master and PhD education. Hobey has completed PhD and started a company after that, and Tanya actually went immediately in a high-tech startup with a master degree. And that was very important topic for our discussion previously last week. What does it take? Do you really need to have certain credentials, certain background? What are the steps? Who can support you? What do you need to bring into a startup? And I think today is a fantastic discussion because we have these two founders and they made quite a journey. I'll leave the surprise. Okay, Candy just quadrupled, I see. Fantastic to see you guys. Xenia is again trying to join us. Hope she can manage the connection. So in any case, this is a very nice startup which I got to learn 3 years ago when Tanya first moved to Groningen. And she made this leap of faith, and I think like in 1 or 2 weeks, right? And just came to Groningen, and we were all like, there is an American startup coming of all places in our small town. What is actually going on? And then we learned not only the story about this fantastic startup, but also the people who are warm, brave, very entrepreneurial and very innovative people. And I'm really happy that they can join today and share the story with the students, with the participants of these Innovation Tuesdays. I'm not going to spend more time blabbering, and I would like to go directly into their story and give the floor to you guys. So Tanya and Hobey, take it away, and we are looking forward to your story.
Thanks, Olga, for that really nice introduction. So yeah, Hobey and I, we have a company called Oro Muscles, and what we're doing is we are finding a way to optimize athletic training and rehabilitation. So we'll get into the details of that in a bit, if you would like. But what we were told to focus on during this talk was kind of the journey and how we started everything, where we started, and how we got here right now. So we have been asked many times since coming here 3 years ago, why are 2 Americans in Groningen? What's happening there? And so because we've been asked this so many times, we kind of have this dynamic worked out into how we start telling it and how we end telling it. And the beginning always starts with Hobey. So Hobey, go ahead.
Yeah, no matter what, we have to tell this story. It doesn't matter if we're at a conference or a bar or a professional setting or with investors. It always starts with how did 2 Americans end up in the Northern Netherlands, of all places? Well, it actually begins in 2015 when some buddies of mine and me, we were watching basketball, and we saw so in the US, we have this basketball tournament called March Madness. And it's a big college basketball tournament. And I would say that it's almost as popular as professional basketball in the NBA, but it's only played with colleges. And in one of the big games, a guy, he got the ball, he came down, and he broke his leg in half on national television. So the whole lower leg, like the bone came through the skin. It was gnarly. So they cut to commercial very quickly. And all of us engineers, we were like, why does that still happen? And so I think that's really the point where we really started thinking about, is there a way to predict injuries? Is there a way to prevent injuries? And so we did what any good engineers would do. We spent about $30, $50 on the internet, and then bought a couple cases of beer, and we started wiring stuff together. So we bought some sensors, wired some stuff together, and said, hey, can we make a sensor system that predicts injuries, essentially? And what we really got into was load management. How do we monitor people with sensors, just easy to use sensors, low cost, unobtrusive, wearable device that we can monitor people and prevent injuries. And the use case morphed from professional basketball player, because we just wanted to see our favorite teams win. It morphed from that to Parkinson's, stroke recovery, neuromuscular disease, and monitoring patients. So it circled back to Tanya and I both have biomedical backgrounds. And so that's when my buddies, they were cool with doing a hobby project. They were cool with just, we literally built, like, we bought a 3D printer for $500 from China, put the parts together and programmed it ourselves. And then, we're just sitting in the living room drinking beer, just having a hobby. But I think that I wanted to take it a little bit more seriously. And I knew that I could do the technology development, but there needed to be I needed someone else to be the CEO of the company. I needed someone else to do the business development, to really form the business case, and to really go forward with the company. And so I asked myself, who do I trust? That's what you need first in a business partner for anything. And two, who hates their life so much that they're willing to start a company? And I said, Tanya, that's the person, because I knew that she hated her job in Boston. And so Tanya can tell you the rest of the story now.
Thanks, Hope. Yeah, just to mention, Hobey and I, we both come from pretty entrepreneur families as well. So we were really blessed to have that type of mindset with us. So Hobey's family, they own 3 Chinese restaurants in Indiana. And then my father, he created his own construction company. So not very high tech, but the mindset is really the first thing that you need in order to bring something to life. So you need to be able to identify the problem and the opportunity. And so what Hobey just described was that problem and the opportunity. And so my master's was focused on bringing a medical device startup to the market. And yeah, I was working in Boston, like Hobey said. I hated my job. It was very, demanding is the wrong word. They sucked my soul, pretty much. So, and I was always interested in doing something in startups, and what Hobey described sounded really interesting. You could help people within athletics and in rehabilitation, and I saw the business case forming in my head. So I put in my 2 weeks, and I drove 20 hours down from where I was in Boston to South Carolina to try to start up a company with Hobey. And so Hobey and I actually tried a couple companies, but this one we really, really believed in, we really stuck with. But what we also noticed was, this is an idea that we have from the outside perspective. What we need is to speak to people, to customers who would be paying for this, who would be using this, so that we can fully understand what are their needs and how can we actually help to solve this pain point. So what I did from there was attended every conference possible in order to learn more about business development, about the need within rehabilitation. One of our mentors, actually, his wife had Parkinson's disease. So that's how we made the transition from sports to Parkinson's. We started interviewing neurological physical therapists. We got a lot of interviews with people like at the Groningen School of Physical Therapy. We networked our way through to the Cleveland Clinic, which is one of the top clinics in the US. We were speaking to a world-renowned expert in Parkinson's disease. He was really enthusiastic, but then we noticed a couple other problems with what we were doing. So at this point, we had gotten our alma mater in engineering to allow us to work with senior design students so that we could help to develop our technology. But those senior design students weren't experts in ICE design and in coding. We got the expert in neurological physical therapy to work with us to be excited about the solution to his problem, but he only wanted to really intimately work with us once we got to clinical trials. So that meant before we even know that there's a product market fit for sure, that people are willing to pay for, that the amount they're willing to pay would actually allow us to break even and create a sustainable company, we needed to invest around 1.5 million or something in development. And we're like, okay, well, that'd be pretty stupid. So the other problem that we had was we really needed a home base. So through all of this, I was making the drive from Cleveland to South Carolina to Indiana, and that whole drive is 20, 25 hours or so. So 4 to 5 Netherlands every month, driving through it. That's not sustainable. What we decided to do was to apply for different accelerator programs. And because of that problem with the neurologist within the Cleveland Clinic, we saw that throughout the US. They weren't willing to risk working with us, risk their time in working with us before they saw an actual product in hand. Our hypothesis, because of how the healthcare industries differ in the US and in Europe, was that in Europe, it'd be different. In Europe, we could find our early adopters to actually work with us from inception so that we can design a product around exactly what they needed, around what they would actually pay for. And we got pretty lucky because that's exactly what happened. We got into an accelerator program that Olga is a part of called Venture Lab North. And that's how we ended up moving from the US to Groningen. So when people ask us why are 2 Americans in the Netherlands, like, do you want the long story, the short story? Because short story is Google. We just Googled it. If they're more interested, then we tell them more. So as Olga said, I moved over 3 years ago. And from there, we just networked like crazy. So we found development partners. Our solution is a connected device. So we have a sensor system that monitors both muscle activity and movement. But as Hobey said before, our core competency is within the algorithm development. So we found partners who have 30 years of experience rather than the senior design students we were working with in the US who had like 4 years of instruction. So they had 30 years of experience in this specific ICE design. And really they have the best technology on the market. And we've been working with them for 2.5 years right now. And we also found those early adopters. So from our developers, we got one sensor that we could test with. And with the early adopters, we were actually able to put that testing sensor onto patients and get data, because the data is exactly what we needed in order to develop this algorithm further. So we're working with the developers called iTwam, and the testing station was called NXTGEN. With iTwam, once we realized how much of a value add their technology would be to our company, we started to negotiate what's called an exclusive licensing deal. So within a certain field of use, within a certain area, we would be the only company to be able to use that technology. And we can talk about that in excruciating detail if you're interested, but high level, it took us 10 months and 10,000 euro to get what we wanted. And we ended up getting it. So now we have a worldwide exclusive license in the field of load monitoring. And with that, and with the data that we were able to collect from our first pilot site, more pilot sites and investors became interested. So you need to prove the concept, you need a proof of concept, and then what you need is to show that bigger players actually want to work with you. So we have this top tier physical therapy center working with us to help to develop this. We have the connections to the top tier neurologists still in both in the Netherlands. So we are speaking to one in Nijmegen as well, and in Cleveland. And with all of that, with the data, with the license, with the business plan that we have, we started working with the Dutch Olympic skating team as well. So with all of this behind us, more and more partners seem to be attracted to us, and we're working with high-level research institutes. We have 2 pending sales right now with research institutes in the US. The Olympic team is really enthusiastic about the device. They want to introduce us to the Olympic Committee, and we just keep forming these nodes of connection. And that's where we're at right now. Hobey, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think just to make sure we answer Olga's question, what does it take to start a company? I think you need 3 things. 1, you need a customer. And so in the US, if you notice from our story, you have to find and grow with your first customers. It might not be where we stay, but we like to stay here, but you have to have customers. Okay. So that's just the truth of it. You need a problem to solve. The customers give you that problem, and they give you the blood of a company, aka cash, to keep on innovating, to keep on producing more product. So 1 is customers. 2 is that you need grit. What is grit? Grit is simply, like, I define it as too stupid to quit, but smart enough to try a different way every time. So that's kind of like my core competency, is that I can just sit, like, I don't have a computer programming or deep AI background, but I literally, during COVID, I sat down and went into MIT's free courseware and learned how to do deep learning and write the algorithm for BlackTop. And now we're partnering with actually one of the PIs from Uppsala that does machine learning and deep AI learning. And we're working on them to develop a machine learning tool to essentially process all the data that we take. So that's number 2. The third thing that I think that you need is to know your why. And I think that's the most important thing. And what do I mean by know your why? Your why has to be like, why are you here? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing all these things? If you don't know that, you're not, like, if you hear about our story and like all the different things that we have to do, and it's literally like, it seems like every time we grow, it's like we have to solve the hardest problem that we've ever solved in our lives. And that's like month by month. And so if you aren't sure of why you're doing things, you're not going to survive. You'll quit. And if you are starting a company, you know, that you put up a lot of money and you put up a lot of time, and it's really a tragedy when you quit. So, and if you only want to start a company because you want to make a lot of money, that's not a big enough why. You will quit. And I guarantee you'll quit with around 2 to 3 years, because, you know, I can show you, just based on a cost benefit analysis, if I took a job after my PhD, I would have made way more money by now. And probably over the next 10, 15 years, I probably would have made more money just getting a normal job. Don't start a company to make a lot of money. Okay. You should be starting a company because you want to do something, whatever that why is. So that would be my answer to Olga's question. What does it take to start a company?
I would add to that and go back to what Hobey said in the beginning. You need to have a team you can trust, who has competencies that actually overlap. So yeah, Hobey and I both come from engineering, but because he specialized in this, because he has the interest in, he pretty much did another PhD in math and artificial intelligence in order to create the algorithms that we have. And with me, I did a lot in business development. I did a lot of research with the exclusive licensing deal, just so that we can combine forces and get exactly what we need for that company. The other thing is you need to understand what your core competency actually is. So when we first started, we tried to develop everything. We tried to develop the hardware. We tried to develop the software. We tried to develop all of it from scratch. And now we realize, like, you have to focus. So what we're actually doing internally, it's creating the logic behind everything and creating that customer integration. So that's where BlackTop comes in, and then we piece everything together. We piece together the firmware, we piece together the AI that we're working with in Uppsala, with the clinicians, with the athletes, and then we're the one who project manage that and puts it all together.
Thank you so much, guys. Other questions? I imagine there are questions. I don't know, Victoria, were you typing the question? No. Because while you're probably formulating a question, I want to come back to what you just said, Tanya, in terms of the overlapping backgrounds and how much you both had to learn. Also, in the beginning, you mentioned that both of you are coming from quite entrepreneurial families. And then Hobey mentioned the word mindset. So what is this mindset and what is that essence? What is this entrepreneurialness that is kind of driving you? Because when I hear the story, Hobey starts with, yeah, I would do what any engineer would do. And yet not every engineer is actually coming up with a solution and starts a business. When you start a company, isn't that engineering background is the common language that you share between the two of you and understanding that gives you the strength of the team? And yet that mindset is actually helping you learn and grow beyond the starting point where you actually came from. Like this learning, what is this mindset and what is this entrepreneurialness for you?
I think the core difference between how like I see myself and how a lot of my friends who did not grow up in entrepreneurial households, you really don't understand money. You don't understand the value of money and how money really works. And it's almost like everything comes from this horn of plenty, but you don't, a lot of people, if you don't come from if you don't work in a family-owned business, or if you don't come from an entrepreneurial background, you don't really see that process of value growth. Like I grew up in a Chinese food restaurant, like, and I don't care what country you're in, like whether you're in the Netherlands, I've seen it in Germany, Spain, Mexico, all over the US, there's always like a 6-year-old kid taking the money at the cash register and doing the orders. And then they're always working at a Chinese food restaurant. That was me. And so I used to hate it because I would have to work for free. All of my other friends would, go out and play and do whatever. And I'd do that until I was 18. Like when I go home for Christmas, Christmas Day is the busiest day at Chinese food restaurants. I have no clue why, but I always work Christmas Day still. Like my dad yells at me and I'm a line cook, even though I have a PhD, it doesn't matter. So coming from that family background, I hated it when I was a kid because I couldn't go out and play with my friends, but I'm pretty thankful for it now because it gave me 12, 14 years of work experience going into college when almost no one had any work experience going into college. And I understood how money worked. Okay. You have to create value. Someone has to give you money. And that's what the cash flow through a business looks like. And then you have to pay people, you have to pay rent, you have to pay all these different things. And I don't think if you don't see that somewhere in your life, that's a huge hurdle in figuring out how to even start a company because you've never seen how a company works.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. And I worked for free a lot, so you get to view your kids as free labor. But I think it's also what do you see as normal? So I grew up with a lot of Italian immigrants around me, third grade education, making a living off of construction and doing better than a lot of people than a lot of the parents of friends who had PhDs. And I'm like, okay, why would I study to get a normal job and then be tied down with the 9 to 5 when I see my dad relaxing in his chair, making a bunch of phone calls, hanging out with his family, and prospering? So I think for me, it's a mindset of there's a different way of life as well. And with both ways of life, there's value. With both ways of life, you can be happy, but it's a choice as to what will make you happier. And for me, seeing the option of having that flexibility and being able to see how things run and make it more efficient for myself, that was a really big inspiration for me. I think the other thing is a lot of people in Western society don't see the art of negotiation in day-to-day life. There's a price at the market, they pay the price, and that's it. But my dad, he took me around to all of his job sites, and I see him going through back and forth. I saw him making an offer, them making a counter offer, him doing the same. And when you see that not everything is fixed as much as a lot of people believe it is, then you can start to create value in your own way.
I think it links fantastically to our next question, which came through the chat. Regarding your collaboration with Uppsala about AI and machine learning, what are the conditions of this collaboration? And how did you find each other and make these conditions?
I think the CEO or the CFO randomly just messaged Tanya on LinkedIn. So I can't stress how important networking is. And, you know, I think if you show up, and that goes with what I was talking about with grit, half of the battle, maybe 60-70% of the battle is just showing up. Because I think a lot of people just don't show up because like opportunity, you have to view it as a game of statistics. Like if you turn, you know, if you don't put yourself out there as much, you're going to call opportunity lucky. But if you're like an entrepreneur, you must put yourself out there and give you more chances to succeed. So you have to turn opportunity into a game of statistics. If I sow 100 seeds, at least one is going to grow. And that's how you have to view networking. And so when we talk about regarding the AI collaboration, for instance, the conditions are we say what we need, and I know enough to say, okay, these are the layers, this is how we abstract stuff, this is the input, this is one as the output, but I don't have the technical competency to really figure out, okay, we need this type of reinforced machine learning algorithm, we need to implement it this way, this is like the lines of code that are actually used. I have no expertise in that. Okay. So this is probably a really good question, because if you have an engineering background, your first job, the company is going to hire you because you have a technical background and you can manage a development cycle or something, or do the development yourself. So it's really important to understand what I'm about to say next. You have to really figure out what is the requirements of the system. So you talk to your customer, you talk to whatever, and you have to figure out and define the requirements of the system. What is needed by the customer, and you scope the project. And then you work with the contractor, which is Uppsala and the AI group, to define the specifications of that system. How are those requirements met? And then how are you going to test if those requirements are met? If those specifications are met? Okay. And then they develop whatever they need to develop. You have regular meetings, and then, you know, they invoice us and we pay them, but we have to test everything first. And we put in a clause in there, you know, it's technically not research, it's contract work. And so we own all the work product, the intellectual property, and all the derivatives of that work product. Okay. So that's where the business and legal side comes in, but it also overlaps with a lot of engineering. And so when you guys are preparing yourselves for careers, understand that engineering gives you like this foundation, but you have to have a lot of other building blocks that you have to develop your toolbox after you leave school as well, because there's a lot of other skill sets that you're going to need to innovate.
So Margaret is asking if his name is Komarowski.
Yeah, actually.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was a connection through LinkedIn, right? So you didn't know each other before, because that's the question.
No.
Like, was it personal contact or connection based on technology?
So I get a lot of random emails from people trying to sell me their product. So if it's not personalized, I don't look at it. So Mr. Komorowski actually, he emailed me once on LinkedIn and it looked like another sales pitch. So I ignored it. And then a month later, he made it more personal and he specifically said why he wanted to work with us. And then a day later, we met with him, and a week later, we're about to sign off on a scope of work with him. So networking is very important, but it should be targeted networking. And to just go off of what Hobey said, like showing up, it doesn't always work out. Like I went to so many useless events, it's not even funny. But also like there's creative ways to get into like high quality events. Can probably not get charged for this now, but I snuck into some events. Like I just showed up to a conference in Chicago. It was supposed to be $5,000 to get in. I'm like, we can't pay for that. But I made this, I didn't make it. My little sister, she's in marketing. She made this flyer for us. And I went to the people outside of the conference and the one guy was like, man, you're young, you're enthusiastic, take my badge. So he gave me the badge to go into this exclusive network where I met a lot of neurologists, neurological physical therapists, rehab specialists, and they helped us. So I'd say show up and be creative.
Thank you. So when you're showing to all of these different events and you're working with all these different people, how do you know that you can actually trust? How do you find the people that you can trust and collaborate with?
I think the best analogy is, how do you trust someone to live with you or start dating them more seriously? A lot of students think that networking is just showing up to an event, shaking some hands, and then giving out a business card, or nowadays, oh, find me on LinkedIn. And then that's the end of it. But really, that's just the beginning of networking, is showing up. You have to curate those relationships over time. Like, I really dislike how, like in our course, when we teach fundraising, we actually tell students, you have to start interfacing with investors early on. And we're going through this process right now because we're trying to fundraise right now. An investor is going to write you a very big check. Like if I asked you right now, will you give me 20 euros? Most of you would not give me 20 euros because you don't know me. What am I going to do with it? How am I going to pay you back? Things like that. And so now think about 200,000 euros or 2 million euros. So when you start asking people like investors, or asking people to do, hundreds of hours of work for you, that's tens of thousands of euros, maybe hundreds of thousands of euros. So the way that you have to really do this is through networking and building relationships. Over time, do I see people doing the same thing? Is there a consistent portfolio of work? Is there consistent behavior? Are they always showing up? The reason why I asked Tanya to partner with me in my company is because at that point in time, I knew her for most of my adult life, or all my adult life. And so, we knew each other for 7, 8 years by that time. And so it's a lot of trust built over just a long period of time. And so when you, for instance, when you pitch to investors, that's not the first time you're meeting investors, or maybe they've probably seen you. They have to see you at networking events. They probably saw you maybe a year ago or 2 years ago. And then they have to see progress every time they meet, and you're showing up to networking meetings and you're showing progress and other people are talking about you. And that's basic relationship building and building your brand. And so when you talk about how do you find people that we trust to work with, one, the skills have to be there. Do you have what we need? And do you need what we have? So there's mutual growth. So everybody's incentivized to grow something mutual. That's the first thing. And two, do you have a good running track record? What do you say about yourself? Can I confirm that with everybody that's already worked with you? And what do you know about us? You know, so it's really, that's how I would say, is building trust.
Yeah, I completely agree, and also add that you're going to make mistakes. You're going to date someone you shouldn't have, but you're going to learn from it. So we did that a couple times and lost some money from it, but now we know how to vet it better, and we know what red flags to look out for, and hopefully know who's good to marry.
Yeah, that's often the comparison, right, between trust and marriage. I have also in the chat here a very specific question, but I know that you will like it very much. Xenia asks, for your work with Parkinson's disease, what is the patient incentive to be monitored? And is that a problem with adopters of your technology?
Yeah, so with Parkinson's, the main problem is the episodic nature of the disease. So what they do in the clinic right now is that they have to kind of do things with the patient so that they initiate these characteristics to come out. We can do the long-term monitoring so that we can see a less episodic nature of the disease, allowing them to see a correlation between what they're doing day to day, their medication timing, the medication dosage. What we were told by the experts is if we can show this data on freezing of gait, on foot drop, on different aspects, different characteristics of their gait cycle or their walking pattern, is that with this data, we can help to differentiate between whether these patients should go to physical therapy or if they should alter their medication timing and dosage.
Yeah, I guess to talk more about what Tanya just said, the basic patient incentives are symptom suppression, more time that you can spend with family as just like being a functional, independent adult. I think those are the biggest patient incentives. The better the clinician understands what you're going through, the better they can tailor your treatment plan. And obviously there's no cure to Parkinson's, but having a better treatment plan or being on the right medicine or being on the right physiotherapy can give you 5, 8, 10 more years with your family that you otherwise wouldn't have. And also people want their autonomy. And we heard this a lot from our patient interviews with Parkinson's, is that a lot of times the clinician will try to put the patient inside of a bucket that they don't really fit in, because like the clinician has like, okay, you have X number of stages of Parkinson's, and then if you have this stage, you get this treatment done. But obviously Parkinson's is a huge spectrum. And from what we've read, those patients all suffer from almost like a different disease themselves. And so what the clinician needs and what the patient wants is the patient wants the clinician to really understand what they're going through and for them to make the best treatment plan possible. And so there's a win-win situation there. And in terms of stakeholders, insurance wants that as well.
And the family. So it gives the family peace of mind with decreased fall risk and increased independence of the patients.
Oh, that for how long did you work for free?
Yeah, I laughed when I saw that too.
I saw that you saw that. We have 3 minutes before the end of this session, actually, and I see the questions actually popping up here. So we have this question about the salary. Any answers to that?
What I suggest is you need to save up money so you can live without a salary for maybe at least a year. I would say 2 or 3 years to be safe. Tanya and I don't recommend this. We started a company because we just don't fit in a corporate life, and the way our minds are set up, I think that we have to really eat what we kill and really reap in the full benefits of the work that we put in. That's how we find fulfillment in life. That's why we started a company. But other people start companies for different reasons. But my advice to anybody starting a company is, especially if you're doing it in healthcare, save up 2 to 3 years of living expenses and learn to live really thin. And Tanya and I actually started a consulting company to bootstrap our other companies. So we did technical management hours, we charged consulting hours, we took some money to pay for ourselves, but most of the money was reinvested in the companies. And we also teach. And so we do medical device commercialization during the day, and then we turn around and teach it to master's level students at night. Yeah.
True. Very brief. I have a question from Lena about the biggest challenge that you faced, and one from Margareta about the mistakes that you did. And advice built on that, apart, of course, from the money.
Yeah, I think that's almost the same question as Margareta just said. Our first product is just a sensor that measures muscle activation data and movement data, and we analyze that to look at movement efficiency, and then we can derive clinical metrics from that. So it's hardware, software, as well as web dashboard. What does it do? I just answered that. Do you want to share any mistakes? Where do we begin? Tanya, do you have one in mind? Because
I have a lot in mind. But I would say, going back to, I think, Lena's question first about the biggest challenge. And the biggest challenge, I think, for us is learning how to communicate with everybody. We've been saying the same idea for 3-4 years now. And just now, like, everything's taking off. But the same thing we were communicating and getting, like, absolutely no recognition for is the same idea that's getting us to work with this Olympic team. And the only thing that changed is how we communicated to different people, how we communicate with the IP attorney, with the clinicians. At first, one of the mistakes we made was trying to get the clinicians to think like engineers. You need to keep the clinicians thinking like clinicians because that's their specialty, and you need to ask the right questions in the right way to derive what you need from them in order to help them with your innovation. But yeah, I've got a lot of mistakes in mind, Hobey. Mark, so trusting someone we shouldn't have. Actually, we can think of 2 examples of that. Getting involved, I think, not vetting our development partners enough. That cost us maybe 15,000 euro at one point when we first started here in Groningen. Just hope you chime in if you think of more.
I think the best examples were trusting people we shouldn't have trusted, and just jumping the gun and not really. I would say the biggest challenge for me is that you need time to make a decision, but you never have the time.
No.
Like you always, especially in the startup world, it's an eat what you kill world. It's the wild, wild west. And anything can happen, and their fires start randomly all the time. And you really have to learn how to be able to think under pressure and still think rationally while there's all the things roll through your head of the worst case scenarios. So I would say that is one of the most challenging things, and the communication problem exacerbates that issue, because when you're trying to deal with fires and talk to all these different key stakeholders, if they can't understand you, then like, how are you going to solve this fire that you can't solve? You need someone else to solve. So I would say those two are the biggest problems, but the biggest mistakes would be like, if you mess up some development, like, okay, whatever, I know what's wrong, I can fix it, right? That's just work. But the biggest things is what Tanya was saying, is that we trusted someone who we shouldn't have trusted. And a business divorce is way nastier than any type of anything that you can go through. That you break up with your boyfriend or girlfriend, you just take your stuff and leave. But usually during a business divorce, they own some of your money in the bank account. And that is, I don't know why, but that hurts more. And it's also kind of like on your brand as well, especially if they're a big player in your ecosystem.
Yeah, I add to that, and another challenge is understanding how you and your business partner respond to stress. Hobey and I respond very differently to stress, and we learn that the way we respond annoys the other one. So it can get into a very vicious cycle if you don't know how your personalities perform in different situations. And you need to be able to recognize when that's happening and understand that there's that fundamental trust still there, enough so that you can work through it.
Thank you for sharing this, guys. And I think it's indeed, it is the most difficult to share your mistakes or your challenges and how you've dealt with it. But I'm very happy that you are still here, that these challenges and these business divorces did not break you in your development, and you're staying strong and you're developing and everything is taking off right now, as you said. I'm also very happy that we still have one more session in 2 weeks from now where we can continue this conversation and we can learn from you how to actually get this trust built, negotiate, and get the position, even though you're always in a rush and you never have time and you have to stay rational, but you still also have to take these decisions quick, and you also need to find a consensus between what your partner wants and what you need to do, and what is best for you and for your company. Thank you so much for sharing your story and being with us today. And I would like to give word to Lina for a brief second, who is going to introduce the speakers of the next week.
There, I found my sound. Thank you, Olga, and thank you, Tanya and Hobey, for a really, really interesting talk today. Next week, we're going to have a panel discussion, and we are going to meet a researcher, a PhD student, and a representative from Uppsala University Innovation, which is the Business Advisory Board and Innovation Advisory Board at Uppsala University. And we're going to have a discussion what it means to bring research developed idea into the market, and what it means to be a researcher and a PhD student and running a company at the same time. So that is what's going to happen next week, and I'm looking forward to meet you all then and to take all the questions to the panel for discussion.
Thank you so much, and wishing everybody a good evening. And once again, thank you guys for the talk, and thanks Uppsala University for hosting us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone.